My dear friends, I'm Ben, someone who spent more than 20 years in personal finance watching countless bubbles rise and burst. And today I'm not here to talk about politics or about Donald Trump as a controversial figure. I want to talk to you about another kind of bubble, quiet, invisible, but already expanding inside many of our lives, the personal financial bubble. When I first heard people talk about the so-called Trump bubble, built on illusion, blind confidence, and the belief that things would always stay good, I thought, aren't we all building our own bubbles too? A friend of mine, Robert, 42 years old, once said, Ben, I'm doing fine. I work hard, I have a house, a car, some investments, I'm good. But a year later, his bubble burst. He had borrowed too much, spent too freely, and invested on the advice of friends, not on understanding. When interest rates rose and the market corrected, he looked around and realized what he thought were assets were actually liabilities. And he said something I'll never forget. Ben, I didn't lose money. I lost an illusion. My friends, every bubble begins with blind belief. We stop asking, what's the real value of this? And start saying, if everyone's doing it, it must be right. But the economy, like life, doesn't work that way. When real value is replaced by false confidence, that's when risk is born. Have you ever asked yourself, why do I keep spending more than I earn? Or why does every paycheck feel like it disappears too fast? Maybe the problem isn't lack of money, it's lack of limits. Just like politics, personal finance has its sweet promises. Go ahead, spend, you'll figure it out later. Or, life's short, treat yourself. But those easy, comfortable thoughts are the seeds of every financial bubble. I've seen so many Americans fall into that trap. They work hard their whole lives and by 60 realize they have nothing left but debt. Not because they were foolish, but because they believed in the illusion of stability, that the next paycheck will cover it, that housing prices will always rise, that this investment can't fail. But life doesn't operate on certainty, it operates on value. And everything without real value will eventually burst. You see, whether it's a Trump bubble or a personal one, both are inflated by hope without substance. People believe a strong leader can save the economy. We believe a higher salary or bigger investment will save our lives. But both forget one truth: no one can save you if you don't understand yourself. Imagine this: you're standing in an old New York market. People are shouting, buying gold stocks, land, even things they don't understand. News rumors and advertisements blend into chaos. And in the corner, one man sits quietly writing, observing, waiting. 10 years later, when the bubble bursts, he's the one smiling. Because he didn't buy illusion, he bought value. I tell you this not to make you afraid, but to remind you every bubble, whether political, economic, or personal, will burst. But if you learn to recognize it, you won't lose everything. Because the goal isn't to avoid bubbles, it's to know whether you're living in reality or in the illusion of safety. My dear friends, I've met thousands of people over more than 20 years in finance. And the truth is, most of them didn't go broke because of one big mistake, but because of small, repeated beliefs that were just a little bit wrong. Every bubble in history, whether economic or political, started with blind faith. During the dot-com bubble, people believed any company with .com in its name would succeed. During the housing bubble, everyone believed home prices could only go up. And in personal life, people believed that having a stable job meant safety forever. But as I always tell my students, nothing is truly safe if you don't understand its real value. I remember a woman named Linda, 55, a retired teacher. She told me, Ben, I invested in this company because all my friends did. They said it couldn't fail. She invested nearly all her savings. 2 years later, the company went bankrupt. Linda didn't lose her money because she wasn't smart. She lost it because she trusted the crowd more than the truth. That's what I call blind faith wrapped in confidence. You think you're in control, but really you're living in the illusion of control. I once read a Stanford study that said, when people hear something repeated often enough, they start believing it even without evidence. We believe in what makes us feel safe, not necessarily what's true. And that, my friends, is how every bubble begins, with comforting but dangerous beliefs. Have you ever asked yourself why you believe things like, buying a house is the best investment, or the stock market always wins in the long run? They're not always wrong, but they're not always right either. Just like believing a strong leader will make the nation great again, it's a nice thought, but it hides a complex reality. And in personal finance, many believe hard work alone brings freedom. But the truth is, hard work alone has never guaranteed financial freedom. If you don't learn how to make money work for you, you're just trading your time for inflation. A friend of mine, Thomas, once earned $150,000 a year, a dream salary for many Americans. But he lived like he made $200,000. Every month he paid for car loans, credit cards, luxury trips, all to reward himself. He said, "I deserve the best." And I told him, "No one disagrees, Thomas, but your bank believes that too." 2 years later, when he lost his job, his bubble burst. Not because he earned too little, but because he believed too much in his own limits. You see, bubbles aren't just stories from Wall Street or the White House. They're stories of all of us people who've believed in something for too long without checking if it's still true. Maybe it's an investment. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's just the feeling that everything's fine. And then one day reality shows up quietly without warning. A call from the bank, a higher bill, an email about job cuts. The bubble bursts not because the world changed, but because we refused to see the truth sooner. I'm not saying this to scare you, but to help you start asking questions. What do you believe that you've never tested? Are you living by real value or by someone else's comforting illusion? Because in finance, as in life, the truth always arrives late, but it never fails to arrive. My dear friends, if the Trump bubble is a symbol of political illusion, where people believe in promises more than action, then the consumer bubble is its smaller twin quietly living inside most of us. It doesn't make CNN headlines or appear on election nights. It happens silently every time you swipe your card shop online or whisper to yourself, "I deserve this." And honestly, I get it, who among us hasn't wanted to reward ourselves with a nice meal, a new phone, or something special? The problem isn't spending, it's what we're trying to fill when we do. Because sometimes spending money isn't about need, it's about covering up emptiness, anxiety, or the quiet fear that we're not enough. I remember a client, or as I like to say, a financial patient named Susan, 36, a marketing professional in New York. She made good money, dressed well, and seemed successful. But one day she came to me and said, "Ben, I don't understand. I'm not in debt, but I never have savings." When I reviewed her expenses, I saw clothes, cosmetics, parties, trips, and dozens of other essentials. I asked Susan, "Do you really need all of this?" She paused and said softly, "I just don't feel good enough without them." I sat there quietly for a moment. Because Susan's story isn't unique, it's the story of millions. We live in a world where having more means being more successful. We're told that if we own better things, we'll be respected, admired, and loved. But that belief left unchecked inflates the consumer bubble. Just as Trump sold the dream of greatness, marketing sells us the illusion of status. They make you believe that a new phone, a fancier perfume, or a luxury car will somehow make you more successful. But in truth, it's just a mini election campaign full of promises, image, and illusion. I once asked a group of students, "If I gave you $1,000, what would you do with it?" 90% said shop. Only 2 said invest. That told me we don't lack opportunity. We lack vision beyond instant gratification. Have you noticed when you're sad, stressed, or lonely, a part of you wants to buy something? A shirt, a fancy coffee, something you know you don't need. That's human. But if we don't recognize it, it becomes a habit, a quiet leak in the wallet, where every small joy becomes a big burden. The consumer bubble doesn't explode like the financial one. It leaks slowly through monthly bills and yearly debt, until one day you look back and realize you've spent a fortune just to feel okay for a moment. I once said in a seminar, you can buy many things, but you can't buy freedom. Financial freedom isn't about how much you have. It's about how little you need to feel enough. Take a moment today, look around your home, your closet, your account. How many things you once had to have are now collecting dust? And how many times have you spent not because you needed to, but because you were afraid to fall behind? That, my friends, is the Trump inside us, the illusion that if I have more, I'll be happier. But just like him, that bubble eventually bursts when reality knocks. I'm not saying you have to live frugally. I'm saying this: every dollar you spend is a vote for the life you'll live. If you use it to buy illusions, you're inflating a bubble. But if you use it to invest in real value, health, knowledge, freedom, that's when you start building true peace. My dear friends, I've seen many people live in comfort until one day everything quietly falls apart. Not because they were foolish, not because they were lazy, but because they believed their bubble wouldn't burst. You know, the scariest thing in finance isn't losing money. It's believing you're still safe when you're not. Markets can rise and fall. Jobs can vanish. Health can change, but people hate to admit it. We love the feeling that everything's fine, even when the numbers say otherwise. I still remember 2008, the biggest financial crisis since the Great Depression. A friend of mine, John, a banker in Texas, once told me, "Ben, I just bought a second house. Everyone's doing it. Prices will keep going up." I didn't argue. I just asked, "And what if they don't?" John laughed as if I'd told a joke. A year later, the housing market collapsed. That second house became a burden. No buyers, no payments possible. John lost his job and his confidence. He asked me, how could everything change so fast? I said, reality didn't come fast, John, it came right on time. Because bubbles, whether on Wall Street or in your life, always burst the moment you believe they can't. That's the nature of illusion. It lulls you to sleep in false safety. I once met a couple, Lisa and Mark, both in their 50s living in California. They worked hard, owned a house, a car, and had a decent retirement fund. But when inflation rose, healthcare costs climbed, and property taxes increased, they began dipping into savings to maintain their lifestyle. I asked, have you considered adjusting your spending? Mark shook his head. Ben, we've lived like this for years. We can't change now. And that, my friends, is the phrase that worries me most. We can't change anymore. Because when you stop changing, you start paying the price. 2 years later, their savings dried up. They sold the house and downsized. Not because they were poor, but because they'd lived in a bubble too long. Do you see yourself in these stories? It might not be about money. It might be that quiet voice saying, I'm fine, when deep down you know you're not. Maybe it's your job, your relationship, or your lifestyle you keep going. Not because it's right, but because it's familiar. Reality always has its way of knocking. It could be a call about layoffs, a medical bill, or just that morning when you check your balance and realize things aren't the same. And when that happens, the bubble bursts not with a crash, but with a quiet click in your mind, it's time to change. I don't tell these stories to scare you. I tell them because when a bubble bursts, it's not the end, it's the beginning. No one escapes reality forever, but the wise prepare before it arrives. Like a sailor who reads the clouds to sense the storm. You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to steer. That's why I always tell my students, don't wish for a perfect market. Learn to be stronger when it's not. Reality doesn't come to punish you, it comes to wake you up. It reminds you that true wealth isn't in numbers, but in your ability to adapt, learn, and rise again. So if your bubble, financial, emotional, or personal, is starting to crack, don't panic. See it as a signal, a moment of awakening, because only when the bubble bursts do we finally see what's real and what was just the shine of belief. My dear friends, if there's one thing I've learned after 20 years in finance, it's this: every bubble eventually bursts, but not everyone knows how to start again. Many people, when loss hits, panic. They blame, complain, and stop right there. But some from those ashes stand up, look back calmly, and rebuild their lives with their own hands. The difference isn't in circumstance, it's in mindset when the bubble bursts. I once met a man named George, 58, who owned a small shop in Chicago. When COVID hit, he lost nearly everything. Customers disappeared, debts piled up, and his house was repossessed. He said to me, voice trembling, Ben, I've worked my whole life. Everything vanished in a few months. I have to start over, but I don't know where to begin. I looked at him and said, George, your bubble has burst, but maybe that's what freed you from the illusion that trapped you. He was silent for a long time. A year later, I got an email from him. The subject line had only 2 words: I understand. Today, he no longer chases profit. He focuses on value. He opened a small coffee shop, teaches his son to manage it, and pays his employees fairly. He doesn't earn more than before, but he lives with far more peace. That's what I want to share with you today. When the bubble bursts, don't just mourn what you lost, notice what you learned. You see, we often fear collapse because we think loss equals failure. But sometimes breaking apart is the only way the light can get in. If everything you believe is always right, you'll never grow. It's only when your world falls apart that you finally see what truly matters. I once read a quote by Warren Buffett. When the tide goes out, you find out who's been swimming naked. It sounds funny, but it's deeply true. When markets crash, when money and reputation fade, our masks fall away. And only then do we see who we really are. I've met many people after their personal bubbles burst. They lost jobs, went bankrupt, divorced, or failed in investments. They come to me and ask, Ben, how do I start again? And I always tell them the same thing. Starting again doesn't mean doing the same thing. It means building something new on stronger ground. If you've lost money, don't just learn to make it back. Learn to manage your emotions when you lose. If your investments have failed, don't just find new ones. Ask why you believed the wrong thing. And if you've overspent, don't beat yourself up. Ask, what was I trying to fill inside me? One of my students, Maria, once said to me, Ben, I thought bankruptcy was the end of my life. I smiled and said, no, Maria. Bankruptcy is the beginning of a humbler but more honest version of yourself. Today, she's a financial advisor, helping other women rebuild after debt. And I believe that if she hadn't fallen, she might never have gained such depth. My friends, bubbles aren't the scary part. What's scary is trying to patch the old illusion instead of creating something new. Rebuilding doesn't mean restoring the old, it means designing something better from the lessons learned. Remember this: every collapse is a renewal. When the economy falls, the wise invest in knowledge. When the market drops, they invest in health, relationships, and skills, of things that never lose value. If you're going through a hard time right now, don't despair. See it as a reset, a chance life is giving you to start again. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to realize the only thing worth keeping is your courage to begin again. My dear friends, there's something I've seen throughout my years in finance. It's not poverty or unemployment that threatens wealth. It's the crowd. Sounds strange, doesn't it? But let me tell you a story. In 2021, during the meme stock craze in America, millions of young investors rushed to buy GameStop and AMC shares, believing it was their ticket to fortune. Social media was flooded with talk of the miracle that's coming. One student I knew, Alex, put his entire $10,000 savings into those stocks. He texted me, "Ben, this is history in the making. I don't want to miss out." I asked Alex, "Do you know what that company actually does?" He laughed. "Who cares? Reddit believes." 2 months later, the stock crashed. He lost almost everything. And I'll never forget what he told me. "Ben, I didn't lose because of the market. I lost because I believed the crowd couldn't be wrong." That's the nature of collective illusion. It makes us forget reason and follow emotion. When everyone's doing something, we feel safe. When everyone's scared, we panic too. And that's why crowds always buy at the peak and sell at the bottom. I often tell my students, if you want true financial freedom, you must learn to move opposite to the crowd's emotions. When everyone says, buy now before it's too late, that's when you should pause and ask, what's the real value here? And when everyone's fearful and selling, that might be your chance. Have you noticed the crowd doesn't need logic, just shared emotion? It's like a tidal wave. Once you're caught in it, it's hard to escape because no one wants to be left behind. That's why most people buy cars, houses, or investments based on what others are doing. We crave belonging. But the price of belonging is often losing your financial identity. A friend of mine, Thomas, you might remember him, the one who earned $150,000 a year, but lived beyond his means, once told me, "Ben, I'm no different from anyone else. Everyone around me lives like this." And that's the problem. If everyone overspends and everyone borrows doing the same, doesn't make you right, it just makes you sink together. A study from the American Institute of Behavioral Economics found that 87% of people's spending decisions are influenced by how others spend, not by what they actually need. That's why you feel like you need a new phone when the old one works fine, or need a trip to Europe because your friends just posted photos from there. We don't buy what we need, we buy approval. And like every bubble, when the crowd wakes up, it's too late. Those driven by emotion lose the most. Those who stay calm survive and often thrive in the next cycle. Warren Buffett once said, "Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful." That wisdom doesn't just apply to Wall Street, it applies to life itself. When others are spending, save. When others show off, invest quietly. And when others despair, look for opportunity. I know going against the crowd is hard. It's lonely. But that loneliness is the silence of the wise. Because crowds don't create freedom, they create noise. In today's world where everything is inflated from stock prices to social media, images clarity is your most valuable asset. And like any great investment, it takes time, discipline, and courage. So if you ever feel lost because you're not following the crowd, remember this. The road to financial freedom is always quiet. And the crowded roads, they almost always lead to one place, another bubble. My dear friends, if there's one thing that makes people repeat the same mistakes, it's that we often value things through the eyes of others, not through our own understanding. When the crowd applauds, we mistake it for truth. When prices rise, we think that's value. But real value is different. It's quiet, steady, humble, and often overlooked. I remember one of my clients, David, 47 years old, a technical director, who came to me with great excitement. He said, "Ben, I just bought a vacation home in Florida. Prices are skyrocketing. I'm going to make a fortune." I asked, "Did you buy it because you needed it or because you believe it will go up?" David laughed. "Ben, everyone's doing it. This is an opportunity." 2 years later, the housing market dropped. Maintenance costs piled up, and he had to sell at a loss. When I met him again, he sighed. "I bought other people's beliefs, not real value." That story reminded me of what my father once told me. "Son, don't chase what shines the brightest, find what holds its light the longest." As a kid, I didn't understand. But after working in finance, I realized the best investments don't excite you. They give you peace of mind. Life is much the same. There are friends who make you laugh and friends who make you better. There are things that make you look wealthy and things that make you feel enough. And sometimes that feeling of enough, that's real value. When you learn to recognize true value, your life changes. You stop buying because others have it. You stop investing because someone else spoke sweetly about it. You start asking, does this bring me closer to freedom? And does this expense bring peace or more anxiety? When you start asking those questions, you've entered a higher level of finance, conscious finance. I once had an older student named Margaret, widowed, living alone, always haunted by the feeling of not enough. She said, Ben, I've saved all my life, yet I never feel secure. When I reviewed her financial plan, I realized the problem wasn't her money, it was her mindset. She kept believing she didn't have enough, so she never felt enough. I told her, Margaret, money can't bring peace if you're not ready to feel it. A year later, she wrote to me, I've started to feel lighter. I finally understand that true value isn't in my account balance. It's in my ability to enjoy life with what I already have. That's a lesson many people spend a lifetime to learn. We don't lack money, we lack the ability to recognize real value. And in today's noisy world, seeing true value is an act of courage. Think about it, what truly brings long-term value in your life. Maybe it's health knowledge, a loyal friend, or peaceful evenings with family. Those things can't be measured by money, but they're the foundation of financial freedom. Because freedom doesn't come from having more, it comes from knowing what really matters. When you know real value, you stop chasing every investment wave. You'll know when to stop, when to hold, and when to move on. You'll stop comparing and start choosing with intention. Remember this, money is a tool, not a measure of worth. True wealth isn't about having more. It's about knowing what's enough. So if one day you find yourself surrounded by the noise of success, possessions, and opportunities, take a deep breath, smile, and ask yourself, among all this, what truly holds value for me? The answer you find, that's the beginning of real wealth. My dear friends, I often tell my students finance is like the human body. If you don't train it, it weakens without you realizing. A healthy body has a strong immune system to fight disease. A healthy financial body has immunity against crises, whether it's job loss, inflation, or market volatility. Most people realize that too late. When a crisis hits, they say, I never thought this could happen. But crises never come unexpectedly, they come when you're unprepared. I once advised a couple, John and Rebecca from Seattle. They earned nearly $200,000 a year, a dream number for many Americans. But when COVID-19 hit, their company downsized. Their income dropped by more than half. They panicked. No emergency fund, no sustainable investments. Mortgage, car loans, credit card debt piling up. John said, Ben, how can we earn so much and still feel broke? I replied, because you have high income, but no financial immune system. A strong financial body doesn't come from how much you earn, it comes from how you nourish it every day. It needs nutrition, exercise, and rest, just like your real body. Saving is the muscle, it lifts you through life's weight. Without savings, you're like someone with no strength. One small shock can knock you down. Saving isn't just setting money aside, it's a mindset, a way of respecting your future self. Investing is the backbone, it helps your financial body stand tall and grow. But investing isn't gambling. It's like exercising, it takes patience, consistency, and discipline. A great investor isn't the smartest one. It's the one who controls emotions when the market swings. And discipline, that's the heart. If saving is the muscle and investing is the bone, discipline is the heartbeat that keeps it all in rhythm. Discipline is saying no to short-term temptations to protect long-term dreams. It's brewing your coffee at home instead of buying a $6 cup, not out of stinginess, but out of respect for every dollar you earn. I once met a man named Michael, 60, retired in Arizona. He wasn't rich, but he never worried. I asked, what's your secret? He smiled, Ben, I treat money like health. Every day I just try to make it a little better than yesterday. No rushing to get rich. No reckless investing. No comparing with others. Just steady saving, mindful spending, and living within his means. Today he's free not because he has too much money, but because he no longer fears losing it. Crises are like viruses, they'll always exist. You can't eliminate them, but you can strengthen your financial immune system so that when they come, you'll stand firm. A person with a strong financial body doesn't panic when markets fall, doesn't fear job loss, and doesn't drown in debt over a car or luxury item. And like your physical body, your financial health doesn't change overnight. It takes time, habits, and patience. Every dollar you save, every investment you learn, every unnecessary purchase you skip, they're all workouts for your financial muscles. Remember this, no one avoids illness forever, but the healthy recover faster. Finance is the same. You might lose money or fail, but if your financial immunity is strong, you'll recover faster than most. So start today. Save even $1, invest even 10, learn even one small lesson about money. Because every action, no matter how small, is a vitamin for your financial health. My dear friends, I've met many people intelligent, educated, full of potential, yet still trapped in poverty. Not because they lacked opportunity, but because they carried something called grievance resentment. They blame the government, the economy, their boss, or others who seem luckier than them. And every time they speak, their voice carries bitterness. Ben, if I had been born somewhere else, my life would be different. Or people are rich because they have connections I don't. I listen and I understand. But I also know this grievance never creates wealth. It only keeps you stuck. You know, I once had a friend named Paul. He was an engineer in Detroit, but when the factory shut down, he lost his job. For 2 years, he lived in anger, angry at the government, his boss, and the economy. Every time I met him, he'd say the same thing. Ben, life is unfair. One day I asked him, Paul, have you ever thought about what you can do with your own hands instead of waiting for someone to save you? He was silent. 2 years later, he opened a small repair shop for farm machinery in his town. Not big, not glamorous, but steady. He told me, Ben, I realized the day I stopped blaming was the day I started winning. My friends, when you blame, you pour your energy into what you cannot control. But money, success, and financial freedom only come when you learn to manage your own energy. It's just like your body. When you're constantly angry, stress hormones rise, your immune system weakens, and your body grows tired. Finance works the same way. If you nurture resentment, there's no room left for clarity, creativity, or discipline. You start seeing every opportunity through fear. You spend money to soothe frustration, not to build your future. I once met a young woman named Amy who owed over $50 in student loans. She said, Ben, I hate America. The system is unfair. It keeps the poor forever poor. I asked, so what are you going to do about it? She sighed, I don't know. Maybe nothing can be done. I looked at her and said, Amy, I don't deny injustice. But if you believe you are powerless, then the system has already won inside your mind. A year later, she came back to me. She had taken a part-time job, started learning personal finance, and paid off half her debt. She smiled and said, Ben, I realize freedom doesn't come from blaming, it comes from taking responsibility. I know letting go of resentment isn't easy. Sometimes it's been with us for so long, it feels like a habit. We're angry at others for being successful, angry at society for being unfair, angry at ourselves for past mistakes. But anger is a double-edged sword. It can drive you for a moment or burn you for a lifetime. Only when you learn to reflect, accept, and start again can you truly grow. I once read a line that said, the rich look for solutions, the poor look for excuses. It sounds harsh, but it's true. Because money in the end is a reward for those who act, not for those who complain the loudest. If you're blaming something today, take a moment, breathe deeply, and ask yourself, what can I control right now? Maybe it's how you spend your money. Maybe it's your attitude toward work. Or maybe it's simply deciding to start again with your first dollar saved. Grievance weakens you. Action, no matter how small, strengthens you. So instead of asking, who made me poor, ask, what can I learn from this? That's the moment you stop being a victim and become the creator of your life. And from that moment on, your journey toward true financial freedom begins. My dear friends, throughout history, every time a political bubble bursts, the world sees chaos. Markets fall, trust collapses, and everything feels out of control. But if you look closer, every collapse also gives birth to new opportunities. I witnessed it in 2008, the worst financial crisis in modern U.S. history. But did you know during that time, hundreds of companies were born: Uber, Airbnb, WhatsApp, Slack. They were created in the middle of despair because their founders didn't see disaster, they saw the gap. When political or financial bubbles burst and the crowd panics, pessimists see fear, but calm minds see, this is the moment the world resets, and if I'm ready, I can start again smarter. I remember one of my students, Daniel, 32, who worked in tech. When COVID hit, his company went bankrupt. While his friends panicked, he started learning about long-term investing, risk management, and online entrepreneurship. When everyone was waiting for the world to go back to normal, he was preparing for the new one. 2 years later, Daniel launched his own digital finance consulting firm. He told me, Ben, if 2020 hadn't happened, I'd still be an office worker, comfortable, but never free. That's how wise people use crises. They don't try to stop what's falling apart, they build something new on top of it. Have you noticed every major disruption, political, economic, or technological, is really a redistribution of opportunity? Those who cling to the old will fear it, but those who learn, adapt, and stay patient, they rise. When any bubble of power bursts, political or otherwise, the world shakes, yes. But it's also when the market reopens for real values, independent thinking, honest work, genuine investing. A farmer friend of mine, Jack, once told me something I'll never forget. Ben, the more the soil is turned, the better the seeds can grow. And he was right. Every time society gets turned over, whether by politics or economics, real value comes to the surface. The question is, what seeds will you plant in that chaos? People fear recessions, inflation, and political unrest. But the greater danger is not knowing what to do when opportunity passes right in front of you. Markets will always fluctuate, that's their nature. But every crisis is a test who has true foundations and who was living in illusion. So instead of asking, when will the world be stable again? Ask, am I preparing for the next opportunity? Maybe it's learning a new skill, cutting debt, building an emergency fund, or simply practicing calm in uncertain times. Because when the storm passes and the ground is soaked and broken, that's when the air is cleanest and the soil is richest. That's when farmers plant again, because they know after the storm the ground is most fertile. Personal finance is no different. When markets crash or political bubbles burst, it's not the end, it's the start of a new cycle. The world will keep changing. There will always be new bubbles of power, money, technology, and belief. But if your foundation is built on real values, you'll stand strong, even rebuild from the ruins. So don't fear crises. Fear not learning from them. Because every time the world breaks a little, it opens a door for those who dare to look deeper, start again, and plant new seeds on old ground. My dear friends, after years of financial coaching, I've learned one clear truth. Not everyone is poor because they lack money. Many are poor because they let debt become the master of their life. When you wake up in the morning and your first thought is, how will I pay that bill? You're no longer free. Debt in many cases isn't just a financial burden, it's an emotional one. I once coached a woman named Linda, 45 years old, working in healthcare. She had a stable income, but was constantly stressed and exhausted. When I reviewed her spending, I found 5 active loans, a car loan, a mortgage, credit card debt, an installment plan for shopping, and a small vacation loan from last year. I asked Linda which of these was truly necessary. She smiled weakly. Honestly, they all started with the same sentence, just this once. And that's how most debt begins, just once, then again and again until it becomes a habit. I'm not saying debt is bad. Debt can be a tool, but only if you control it, not the other way around. It's like fire, it can warm your home or burn it down, depending on who holds it. I once said in a seminar, debt doesn't kill you, but the habit of living on tomorrow's money does. And that's true for every age. The young borrow for cars, phones, and vacations. Middle-aged people borrow to keep appearances. Older adults borrow because they fear not having enough. We borrow not because we need to, but because we want to feel safe right now. But the price of short-term safety is long-term insecurity. I once had a student named Mark. He earned nearly $100,000 a year, but owed $60,000 in credit card debt. When he came to me, he said, Ben, I know I have to change, but I don't know where to start. I pay interest every month, but never get out of debt. I asked, if debt were a disease, would you want to cure it completely? He nodded. So we began with one simple rule: no new loans, no emotional spending, and focus on paying down one balance at a time. 2 years later, Mark was debt-free. He told me something I'll never forget. I thought I needed more money, but what I really needed was less debt. My friends, in personal finance, there are 2 kinds of debt: good debt and bad debt. Good debt helps you build assets like a reasonable mortgage, investing in education, or starting a business with a plan. Bad debt drains your value like consumer loans and impulse purchases that only make you feel rich for a moment. But the real issue isn't just the type of debt, it's your attitude toward it. If you see debt as normal, you'll stay trapped in the cycle forever. But if you see debt as a fever that needs treatment, you'll start living with intention. You'll learn to save before you spend, invest before you consume, and ask yourself before every swipe, will this make me freer or more bound? I often tell my students, when you owe money, you don't just owe the bank, you owe your future. Because every dollar you borrow today is a promise that you'll work for your past tomorrow. And that's the saddest truth about those with great potential. They lose their future for a few moments of temporary joy. If you're in debt, don't blame yourself. We've all made mistakes. What matters isn't that you're in debt, it's whether you're ready to make peace with your money. Start small, track every expense, make a repayment plan, and promise yourself this: from today, I control my money. Because freedom doesn't come from how much you earn, it comes from how little you owe. One day when you wake up without thinking about bills, interest rates, or overdue payments, that's the day you're truly wealthy. My dear friends, after years of working with people from all walks of life, from college graduates to retirees, I've learned this. The smartest investment you'll ever make isn't in banks, real estate, or stocks, it's in yourself. You can lose money, your job, even your reputation. But if you keep learning, growing, and caring for yourself, you can always start again. Your true wealth, knowledge, health, experience, and skills cannot be taken away by any crisis. I remember once during a seminar in Boston, a man around 50 asked me, "Ben, if you only had $10,000, where would you invest it?" The whole room went quiet, expecting me to say stocks, bonds, or real estate. I smiled and said, "I'd invest in myself because it's the only investment that never crashes." He looked curious, so I explained. When I invest in myself, learning a new skill, reading a good book, exercising regularly, or nurturing inner peace, I'm increasing my long-term value. And when my value grows, every opportunity in life multiplies. I once met a woman named Sarah, 38, who worked in tourism. When the pandemic hit, she lost her job, her income, and her confidence. She told me, "Ben, I've lost everything." I asked, "Do you still have your health?" "Yes." "Do you still have time?" "Yes." "And can you still learn?" "Yes." I smiled. "Then you still have everything." A year later, Sarah learned digital marketing and started a small travel YouTube channel about American culture and landscapes. When she sent me her channel link, I saw her description read, "I lost everything except the belief that I could start again." And now she earns more than she did before. My friends, markets may crash, currencies may devalue, but knowledge and skills never go into recession. They're the only assets you fully control. Just like your body, if you care for it, it rewards you with strength and peace for life. But if you neglect it, no investment can save you when your health and spirit collapse. I once asked my mentor, a veteran financial advisor now, 72, "What advice would you give to the younger generation?" He smiled and said, "Ben, when I was young, I thought financial freedom meant having lots of money. But as I grew older, I realized true freedom means having the time, health, and wisdom to do what I love." That line has stayed with me for years. It taught me that investing in yourself isn't just about making a living. It's about learning how to live. Many people say, "I don't have time to learn, exercise, or grow." But the truth is you can't afford not to. Because if you don't spend time upgrading yourself, you'll spend your whole life paying the price for staying the same. Think of yourself as a business. You are the biggest investment of your life. Like every business, you need a long-term growth plan. Your stocks are your skills, your profit is your freedom, and your equity is your health, confidence, and knowledge. When you invest in yourself, you don't just become richer, you become calmer. Because you know that no matter how the world changes, you can always rebuild. You're not afraid of losing your job because you can create one. Not afraid of losing money because you can earn it again. Not afraid of the future because you're prepared to face it with strength. My friends, if today you're wondering, where should I start? Start with yourself. Learn something new, read a book, exercise, do something that makes you proud. Because that's not spending, that's investing. And trust me, it's the only investment that pays dividends for a lifetime. My dear friends, after years of stories, lessons, and numbers shared with hundreds of people, I've come to realize something simple yet profound. Kindness is the most enduring asset we can ever own. You can lose money, your job, even your reputation. But if you still hold on to kindness, you've never truly been poor. Because kindness is the only currency that can't be stolen, can't be inflated, and never depends on the market. I once met a man named Henry, a 62-year-old mechanic in Ohio. He worked hard his entire life, never had much money, but there was something special about him. Every time I visited his shop, there were always a few young men helping out for free. I asked Henry, "Why don't you just hire some workers to make things faster?" He smiled and said, "Ben, they don't work for me, they learn with me. I'm just passing on what I know." When Henry passed away, the entire town came to his funeral. No one remembered him as a rich man, but everyone said the same thing. Henry was a good man, and I thought that's the truest legacy a person can leave behind. My friends, in the world of finance, people talk about portfolios, dividends, and profits. But there's one kind of profit that can't be measured in dollars, the peace that comes from knowing you've lived right. I once coached a businessman named Richard. He owned companies and properties all over the country, yet he couldn't sleep at night. He told me, "Ben, I have everything, but I'm not happy." I asked, "Have you ever helped someone without expecting anything in return?" He paused. Months later, he emailed me, I started paying tuition for 5 students. Every thank you letter I get makes me feel lighter. I think this might be the best investment I've ever made. That's what I believe. Kindness always pays dividends, just not in money but in joy. Many people think finance is about numbers, charts, and spreadsheets. But really it's about people, about trust, integrity, and how we treat each other. A person can be smart, quick, talented, but without kindness, they will eventually lose everything. Because trust is the real currency of this world. I often tell my students, when you do what's right, the reward may come slowly, but it always comes. When you do what's wrong, the reward may come quickly, but it never stays. That's not just a law of finance, it's a law of life. You know, some of the truly wealthy people in this world aren't famous at all. They don't show off, they don't compete, they don't shout. They just live kindly, work hard, and quietly help others. And life rewards them with something money can never buy: trust, love, and peace. When I was young, I used to think financial freedom meant having enough money to never worry again. But as I grew older, I learned that true freedom means living by your values without compromise. And to do that, you must build your life on the foundation of kindness. Kindness is like a seed. You plant it today, you may not see results tomorrow. But one day it will bloom in your life or in the lives of those who come after you. A gentle word, a helping hand, a selfless act, all of these are invisible shares that grow forever. My dear friends, when you look back on your life, you won't remember the things you bought, you'll remember the people you helped. You won't be proud of your highest financial return, but of the moments you lived true to your conscience. That's real wealth, the kind that no time, no crisis, no bubble can ever take away. So if you ask me, Ben, what's the safest investment in life? I won't say gold, stocks, or real estate. I'll say this: invest in kindness. It's the only currency that never loses value. My dear friends, if you've walked with me through this journey, through illusions, fears, mistakes, lessons on value, financial health, and kindness, then you've likely realized financial freedom isn't just about money. It's a journey back to yourself. We live in a noisy world where everyone tells you to buy more, do more, own more. But the truth is, you don't need more to be happy. You just need enough and understanding, enough love, enough clarity, enough faith to live by your true values. I've seen people rich in possessions but bankrupt in peace. They had everything except calm. And I've met others with very little yet they live freely and lightly. Because they understand true wealth isn't in your account, it's in your mindset. If today you're tired from bills, debts, or worries, pause for a moment. Take a deep breath. And remember, you still have the power to change. Life doesn't need you to be perfect. It just needs you to be honest with yourself. You can't control the market, interest rates, or politics. But you can control how you respond. You can choose to spend less, learn more, and live with purpose. You can stop chasing the crowd and rebuild from solid ground where money serves you, not controls you. I've always believed that every crisis carries within it a seed of rebirth. When a bubble bursts, we lose illusion, but we find truth. When we fail, we lose ego, but we gain strength. And when we let go of resentment, we lose bitterness, but we find peace. A student once asked me, Ben, how do I know if I'm on the right path? I said, if every day you feel a bit wiser, a bit lighter, and more grateful, you're getting richer. Wealth isn't about having more than others. It's about having fewer things that make you uneasy. And freedom isn't about escaping pressure. It's about learning to smile within it. If you're in your 20s, start learning about money. If you're in your 40s, start living with discipline. If you're in your 60s, start teaching what you've learned. It's never too late to start again. Never too late to make peace with money, life, and yourself. My dear friends, I don't know where you are on your journey, beginning exhausted or standing between faith and fear, but I know one thing for sure: you can change. Because every great transformation begins with one small decision. A decision that says, I deserve a life that is freer, calmer, and kinder. And if what I've shared today resonates with you, turn it into action. Start small, track your spending this week. Save your first $10. Read one more book. Say one kind word to someone. Those small actions repeated daily are the compound interest of life. Because financial freedom doesn't come from miracles, it comes from small choices repeated with love and discipline. Before this video ends, I just want you to remember one thing. When you change your relationship with money, you change your relationship with life itself. And if you believe you can start again, hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs a spark of hope. Because sometimes one story can change a life. I'm Ben, and I believe that each of us can rebuild freedom from the inside out. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next journey.